time to work on the essay. You can apply, any of those 7. Also, if you'd like me to read like a full-blown, complete rough draft, the deadline for submitting that is this Friday. So you want to email it to me by Friday.
Can we use the one of the dates for the banks for the Friday?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the reason I have the Friday one is just I need to be able to read everyone's, right? So, yeah, I guess that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. But again, I'm happy to kind of help at any point. So even if you don't have a full rough draft, if you want me to go over an outline or help you come up with an outline or talk about evidence to use or just help with any problems, I'm happy and available. So all you need to do is just let me know. You can talk to me after class, send me an email, office hours. I'm happy to kind of set up a meeting or help however I can. Okay. Are there any questions about the essay? Okay. Also remember, next week there's no classes on Monday, right? So Tuesday we'll be operating on a Monday schedule. So we'll have class Tuesday, here, same time, same place, and then on Wednesday. Anything else? No? Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about an important skill for the essays. This is using evidence. And then we will go back and finish talking about tyranny in Athens. All right, so 2 important terms for this class, and really any history class in general. Analysis, evidence, right? You are being asked to analyze primary sources, which is something more than just reading them, right? You're not simply looking for details, but you're trying to kind of understand primary sources as artifacts. That requires analysis, context, interpretation, significance. What can this artifact tell us about the past? And then there's evidence, specific details, quotes, paraphrase, information that you pull from the primary source that supports your analysis. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about evidence. So, say you had a prompt. Explain what the Odyssey, famous Greek heroic poem about Odysseus, right? Explain what it tells us about how the early Greeks understood life, death, and beyond. In other words, what happens after death. So say this is your prompt. So I've got 2 different answers to the prompt. All right, we're going to play a game. Which one is better? All right, answer 1. The underworld was filled with the spirits of the dead and seems to have been conceived of as a sad, miserable place. In fact, the poem tells us that the Greeks believed that it was better to be alive than to be dead. Okay, answer 1. Answer 2. Odysseus greets the spirit of Achilles, whom he assumes must be a ruler among the dead, due to the fact that Achilles had been the greatest of the Greek heroes. When Achilles responds that he would, quote, would rather live on earth as the hired help of some landless man whose own livelihood was meager than be lord over all the dead who have perished, Odyssey, page 2, he does not actually contradict Odysseus, but instead calls attention to the meaninglessness of the assumption. With this quote, Achilles is saying that the best conceivable existence in the afterlife is still somehow worse than the life of the poorest living peasant. This assertion is supported by by Homer's description of the afterlife as a dark and cheerless place inhabited by truly lifeless spirits who cannot even speak without drinking the blood of the recent sacrifice. Odysseus, page 1. The depiction of the underworld in the Odyssey indicates that the early Greeks viewed life as something unique and thus something to be cherished because the sensations and experiences that were part of being alive were lost forever upon death. Okay, which one's better, 1 or 2? Who votes for 1? Who votes for 2? Right, okay. No doubt. So why is 2 a better answer than 1? And not just because it's longer. All right, Kieran.
It has citations.
It has, all right, so 1, there are citations there from the text, right? You can see parenthetical, Odyssey, page 2, page 1. All right, Mark.
Here you see all the evidence and
Okay. So we see examples of both analysis and evidence. Okay? Now, let's hold off on the analysis for a second. I'll come back to that. Where do you see evidence here in this answer? Where are there specific details from the primary source? Nicolette?
Right there, where they're quoted.
Okay, so we see some examples that are quoted, right? Quote, would rather live on earth. Quote, who cannot, quote, no, I take that back. Quote, right up there, right? The other one's not quoted, it's cited, but it is
Stated?
it's stated. It's a paraphrase, right? So it's basically a summary of a what would have been a much longer quote, right? This too is evidence, referencing specific details from the text, even though, right, not quoted, still it's something specific coming from the text, right? Now, there's analysis in both. In fact, both answer 1 and answer 2 are the same answer, right? Same analysis. What's the answer to this prompt that both of these answers state, right? What does it tell us about life, death, and beyond? What's the answer, Nicolette?
It tells us that the Greeks believed it was better to be alive than dead.
Yeah. All right, so both authors here reach the same conclusion. They analyzed the document, they came to the same conclusion, and they're both right in that regard, as much as something can be right, right? So the difference isn't the answer that they kind of came up with to the prompt, it's how they stated their answer, and more specifically, how they proved it, right? Because here we get an answer without proof, without evidence, right? Here we get evidence, right? Specific details, quotes, whatever, from the document that support one's analysis. How do you know it was better to be alive than dead? Well, this is what Achilles says, and this is what being dead looked like. Okay? Something else I want to point out. More than simply just saying, here's a quote, what does the author to this answer do with the quotes or with the paraphrases?
He breaks down the quote.
So what do you mean by breakdown?
Like when he goes, like with this quote, Achilles is saying that the best conceivable existence in the afterlife, like he's explaining it more.
Exactly, right? Explaining what does this quote actually mean, what does it say, and how is it relevant to the prompt, right? So the quote is relevant to the prompt, it's a good quote, but you don't want to leave your reader doing that work, right? The author wants to provide the evidence and then explain why this evidence helps support your answer, right? Oftentimes it means explaining kind of in your own words what it says and why it's relevant. Everyone kind of see that? Right? So same thing here. Here's the description of the underworld. Not letting the description just stand on its own, right? This description tells us something about Greek's conception of the underworld, right? That it's not the same as being alive, that it's something different. And so therefore life is something unique. Okay, so the key to doing well on this essay, the key to doing well on any history essay, right? Analyze and explain evidence. Provide evidence and explain it, analyze it, the specific evidence, as part of your larger answering of the prompt, right? Don't simply restate text. Citing evidence. All right, when do you provide citations? Again, hopefully this is old news to people. When you're quoting or paraphrasing something, or even if you are referencing specific details, right? So even if it's not an exact quote or paraphrase, but you're talking about something specific about, in this case, ancient Greece, right? You want to tell your reader, well, where did this detail, or where did these figures, or where did this information come from, right? Kind of a secondary category here for this class, right, is especially important to cite any non-class materials that you look at. Now, are you supposed to look at non-class materials? No, you are not. I do not want you to look at non-class materials. You should not look at non-class materials. They will not help you in any way on this, or they shouldn't help you, right? So you're not supposed to look at non-class materials. But if you do it anyway, if you don't listen to me, right, you can't help yourself, you better make sure you cite it no matter how you're using it, right? Difference between not following directions, academic dishonesty. Everyone good? Okay. Again, just use the class sources and you'll be great. All right. The format I suggest, like I said, I do not care about formatting. I do not want you to care about formatting and listen in this class, right? People spend way too much mental energy on what format should my citations be as opposed to, do I need a citation here, right? So what I want you to focus on for this essay, and really all of them, are knowing when to provide citations, right? So knowing when to provide something that indicates where this information comes from, right? I recommend just doing parenthetical. Just like I had in the previous answers, just put parentheses, the author, and something that references specifically where you got it. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be exact. That will do the job. If you want to do something more elaborate, if you want to put in a footnote, if you want to, okay, you do you, all right? But again, you want to have a citation, that's the most important thing. Okay, questions here? Mark.
See the author, right? So the question I had is, do we have to put the title of the reading, or just...
You can put whatever seems most helpful in identifying where, what document you're looking at. So in some cases, it's going to be an author. In some cases, right, we might have something like, it's all over stuff. Some stuff, it might be something like, I'm trying to think of what we have in this class. We haven't had any. There'll be some things about authors. You can put the title to, that's fine. I don't care, right? You just want to show this is a site. This is where I got the information. Okay. Did I see another hand over here? Kieran.
Can we have a reference page?
Yep. If you want to, go for it. It gets you nothing in it, it gets you no additional bonus or anything like that, but if you just, that's the way you operate and you feel better when that's done, great. All I want you to do is not obsess about formatting references, all right? Because again, people spend way too much time on that, and that would be time spent on finding good examples of the evidence, right? Okay, other questions? Okay, all right. Again, I am available to help. I'm available to act as a resource. All you have to do is reach out. Okay, so before we get to the Persian Wars, we're going to talk a little bit more about the end of tyranny in Athens. All right, so we've got Kieran, Gabriella, No, Abdul, we've got Mark, we've got Mohammed, we've got Nicolette, got Taisha, got Brian, Johan, Anthony, and Jeremy. 3, 6, 7, 9, 10. All right, they're all here. Okay, so we were talking about the rise of tyranny, right? Pisistratus eventually seizing power in Athens after several attempts, right? And again, the fact that people generally see Pisistratus as, doing a positive job governing Athens. However, things aren't going to end well for the Pisistratid family. So Pisistratus dies. His two sons, Hippias and Hipparchus, take over. Hippias is the elder, right? He's kind of the main tyrant, I guess. Hipparchus seems to have some sort of role. So Hipparchus ends up getting murdered. The story goes Hipparchus is really, really attracted to Harmodius, right? And he basically makes a pass at Harmodius. Harmodius, however, isn't interested in Hipparchus. He is, in fact, interested in Aristogeiton over here, right? So a particular relationship, right? Kind of romantic sexual relationship between two men, right? This is what's called pederasty in ancient Athens. We'll talk more about it in our next class, I think, next week. But anyway, for now, Hipparchus makes a pass at Harmodius. Harmodius shuts him down. Says, nope, nope. So, Hipparchus is upset. He ends up publicly slighting, kind of shaming Harmodius' sister. Basically doesn't allow her to participate in this important religious festival, which is, again, kind of a, I guess shameful is not quite the right word, but kind of makes her look bad, diminishes her status. So, Harmodius gets really upset. He gets together with Aristogeiton, and they murder Hipparchus. Right? Now again, this kind of seems to come out of largely kind of a, romantic / honor situation, but this act is going to be held up by later Athenians as a watershed moment, right? Striking the first blow against tyranny and a blow for freedom, right? They become known as the tyrannicides, right? Those who killed the tyrants, and statues of them will go up around Athens. But the tyranny's not done, right? They kill the younger brother Hipparchus, but Hippias is still in charge. And some sources say this act of murder pushes Hippias to become a more cruel tyrant who's going to start turning against the Athenians. Who knows, right? But again, Athens is still under the tyranny of the Pisistratid family. Something needs to happen. As the story goes, at this point, whenever the Spartans visit the Delphic Oracle, the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi, to get advice from the god, the only answer they get is free Athens. The Spartans say, should we go and travel over here? The answer is free Athens. Sparta asks, well, what should we do about this problem at home? The answer is free Athens, as the story goes. Is this a legitimate command from the god Apollo? Or, as others suspected, have the Alcmaeonid family of Athens, if you remember, the people who were killed Chilon and kicked out of the city and then let back in the city, and then were kicked out of the city again under Pisistratus, and are hoping to maybe get back into Athens. Maybe this is them bribing the Delphic Oracle to get the Spartans to take action. Who knows? But Sparta finally decides, okay, maybe we need to do something about this. The Spartan army marches on Athens in the year 510 and expels Hippias from the city. The Athenian tyranny is over. Sort of. What do you think?
Fez, do you have a pen?
So, this is going to be a big, important moment for Athens. The tyranny is done. What comes next? There are going to be competing claims. One, we have a guy named Isagoras, who wants to put in place a very limited oligarchy. This is going to be the best response to the tyranny that had existed earlier, right? Because remember, tyranny is not so much about bad behavior, right? It's about unconstitutional seizing of power, often connected with populism. So Isagoras wants the kind of strict oligarchy, right? And the Spartans seem to support him. Then we have someone else. We have Cleisthenes of the Alcmaeonid family, who get to go back to Athens after Hippias is kicked out, right? Cleisthenes wants kind of a broader government, something that's a little bit more inclusive. The Spartans are having none of this, no more of this kind of populism in any way. They basically push Cleisthenes out of the city. And they say, well, look, your family's cursed. You got to get out of here. You're not allowed to stay. And they force him to leave. But as they are trying to do this, the Athenian people rise up. They refuse to support the Spartans and end up forcing the kind of Spartans to leave, and basically give Cleisthenes the power to establish a new constitution, a new political organization for Athens. The political organization that Cleisthenes comes up with is considered to be kind of the foundation of the Athenian democracy. So this is why he is, generally considered the founder of democracy. Right.
Wait, is democracy and direct democracy the same thing in Greece? Or?
Yes. When we talk about Athenian democracy, it will eventually become a direct democracy. But we're kind of partway there right now with Cleisthenes. And we'll talk about that more also next week. Question? All right. So what does he do that's so important? At first, it doesn't really seem like all that kind of in terms of establishing democracy. What he does is he reorganizes basically how political power is going to be allocated, how it's going to be divided among the people. And he reorganizes it in a way to break up kind of traditional alliances and rivalries. If you remember, right, what is driving the rise of Pisistratus is this factionalism between the three different factions that Pisistratus is going to exploit in order to become tyrant. So what Cleisthenes does is he gets rid of the old, what we translate in English as tribe, kind of tribal structure. These kind of four big groups that all Athenian citizens were part of, and kind of through which all politics was organized. And instead, he develops 10 brand new tribes. And then he divides up Athens into three different big regions: the city, the shore, and inland. Then he further divides up each of these regions into 10 trides, right? So basically, thirds, 30th, I guess technically, trides. So that there's 30 total. There's 10 trides in the city, there's 10 trides in the shore, there's 10 trides in the inland area. And each tridi is made up of a different number of demes. Demes were already kind of pre-existing neighborhoods or villages. Okay, this is the important point that I want you to take away. You don't need to know all the fine details, right? Is that a new tribe, remember there's 10 new ones, consists of one trides from each region. So one city trides, one shore trides, one island trides is going to be meshed together to form a new tribe. Okay, what this looks like. Again, you do not have to do anything with this. You probably can't even see it now, but I urge you to take a look at the slide at some point just because you can kind of see how crazy it is, right? It's all designed to kind of create tribes out of people from disparate areas, right? So you can see kind of the colors here reflect the tribes, like this. These are three different trides, right? These are now going to be a new tribe, right? So a tribe is going to consist of people that from different regions of Athens. And then even in some cases, you almost get like sub-regions, right? Like you've got like these four demes are together, but then this deme is another trides with another tribe, right? This is kind of what I mean by it's crazy. It's like really trying to kind of shake things up so that these old traditional power blocks that relied on or that were grounded in kind of region are going to be broken up.
So would people have to like physically move around?
No, they wouldn't have to move. It was this was the basis for how politics was going to work and be organized. So you didn't have to move. It didn't change your kind of day-to-day life, but kind of it changed your political power. Okay? And really started to limit the political power of some of the old school elites. All right. The other thing he does is he reorganizes the kind of the leading council. So if you remember back when we talked about Solon, Solon established a council of 400. And this council would basically set the agenda for the assembly. And so this was a kind of a powerful body, right? Because it would decide what the assembly was going to talk about, what it was going to vote on, and when. So Cleisthenes reorganizes this, right? He turns it from a council of 400 to a council of 500. It's called boulé in Greek, right? And this is going to be made up of 50 members from each of the 10 new tribes. So for a year, there would be a council of 500, 50 people from each of the 10 tribes, and each month, one tribe, one group of 50 from a tribe, would kind of be in charge of leading affairs. And these individuals get called prytanes. Okay, so long story short, by breaking up these old aristocratic power blocks, Cleisthenes is going to make it possible for increased participation in Athenian politics. Hence, foundation of the Athenian democracy. But we're not at a true democracy yet. Not everyone's place here is equal, right? And we'll talk more about that next week. Okay, questions here? So again, don't worry too much about the details here. Think big picture, right? Breaking up old, powerful, aristocratic power blocks and increasing kind of political participation in kind of leadership roles. All right.
I just have a question.
Oh, yeah.
What was the population of the population at the time? Overall, I feel like 500 is kind of a large number of.
Oh no, I mean there's at the lowest tens of thousands of people in Athens. Probably I mean we don't know for sure. There's lots of debates about it. Maybe up in the hundreds. Because Athens itself is not just the urban center, but it's also kind of the surrounding region of Attica. Here, right? All of this is Athens, right? And the urban center of Athens is kind of here. So, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Okay. Where do you get to when we talk about their jury sizes? Also going to be up in the hundreds. All right, so now we're going to shift to another watershed moment, the Persian Wars. All right, so our timeline. This is what we've talked about in previous classes. 1200 BCE, there's going to be a climate shift, leads to drought, right? Drought leads to resource scarcity and increased warfare. Resource scarcity and warfare leads to economic decline. And again, this is impacting all of Afro-Eurasia. The large kingdoms in Southwest Asia that we talked about way back on like class 2, right? So like the kingdoms of Babylonia, the kingdom of Egypt, right? The Hittite kingdom, right? They are going to fragment, right? Because of, well, everything up top. The Mycenaean culture in Greece, right? Ruling from their kind of fortified kind of cities, right? This is going to be the end of the Mycenaean culture, right? So after this point in Greece, right, because of this economic decline, we get the kind of so-called Dark Age period, and then the growth in the Archaic period that we've been talking about for the last couple of classes. Okay? So we've been talking about this part for the last couple of classes, Now I'm going to shift really quickly what's happening in Southwest Asia after this, right? It's going to be the rise of empires. So about 200 years after this kind of climate shift, right? Again, we're going to see a period of growth happening in Southwest Asia, much like we see in Greece, right? We're going to get the rise of the Assyrian Empire, or the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So the Assyrian heartland is kind of up here. This is like the northern part of Mesopotamia, right? So further north than kind of the traditional power base of like Babylon and Ur down here. So the Assyrians are going to invest a lot in military technology. And they're going to be very, very good at it. So they are going to start expanding, and because of their kind of military technology and tactics, they are going to be able to, and you can kind of see from the map here in the colors, conquer a huge territory of land, right? They're going to kind of control a much larger territory than had ever kind of existed in this region under a single government. Okay? We call this an empire as opposed to a kingdom, not simply because it's bigger, but really the hallmark of an empire is that it's multi-ethnic. That there are groups of people that have kind of clearly defined, distinct ethnic identities, oftentimes because they had previously been politically independent, that are now under a unified single government. So that's kind of what we mean by empire. Not just big, but it is clearly multi-ethnic. Everyone with me there? All right. So again, military technology and tactics allow the Assyrians, after this period of recovery, to conquer big territory here, right? What did they do? First thing is that they invested in a professional standing army. So rather than adopting this militia model that pretty much everywhere else in the world had been using, and in the case of Greece, continues to use, right? They had a full-time army. Much like the Spartans, their only job was train and prepare to fight. New technology and tactics, right? Especially related to siege warfare. All sorts of weapons and machines that allow them to conquer fortified cities. And the other thing they develop, right, is kind of a new way of administering a large area, right? That they divide their empire into provinces, each with its own governor. They establish a road network to kind of help facilitate communications. They give the governors kind of local powers, military garrison, right? And this provincial organization is what allows the Assyrians to hold on to a big territory for over 300 years. Okay. Any questions here? Brief nutshell, right? It's going to collapse, right? Basically, the government's going to get weak. Two kind of major powers are going to come out of this collapse, right? The Babylonians, who are kind of the first to rebel here, and they're going to reestablish their own independent kingdom. And then coming from the east, we have the Medes. So the Medes were an Iranian people, right? So from Iran, you can see Media up on the map. They are going more powerful. They're extending their power westwards. They are going to help fragment the Assyrian Empire. Why is all this important? Well, it's important for what the Neo-Assyrian sets up, what the Neo-Assyrian Empire sets up. And this is the Persian Empire, specifically the Persian Empire under the Achaemenid dynasty. So Achaemenid, again, is a family name, the family of Achaemenes, right? And four of the first Persian rulers from this dynasty: Cyrus, Cambyses, Darius, Xerxes. All right, so Cyrus, the Achaemenid, ruled a small kingdom down here in southern Iran, right? An area that will come to be known as Persia. And again, they were small, not all that important. The important power here in this region were the Medes, right? We just talked about expanding eastwards, right? Disrupting the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The Medes are also controlling most of Iran and even pushing further westwards up to modern Afghanistan. So the Medes were the big Iranian power. Cyrus, small kingdom that was kind of right on the borders of Media, kind of under the Medes' influence. Like the Neo-Assyrians, Cyrus recognizes the benefit of investing in his military. So he is going to invest heavily in his military. Again, new technologies, new tactics, right? This is going to give him the power to expand and start taking over some of his immediate neighbors. Cyrus's kind of growth makes the Median king very, very concerned. Hey, this guy is like expanding pretty quickly, conquering his neighbors. We need to take him out before he gets too big. So the Medes attack, but against all odds, Cyrus wins and actually ends up absorbing, taking over the Median kingdom for himself. He continues his expansion, conquering the relatively recently independent Babylonian kingdom, conquering Asia Minor, right? We saw the story earlier about Cyrus conquering Croesus and Lydia, right? As he's marching into Lydia, Croesus, the king of Lydia says, as Cyrus is marching into Asia Minor, Croesus, the king of Lydia, goes to the Delphic oracle, says, should I attack Cyrus? Delphic oracle says, if you attack Cyrus, a great empire will fall. Croesus says, all right, awesome, right? Because what does he think is going to happen?
He'll win.
What's that?
He'll win.
And why does he think that from the prophecy?
He's gonna fall.
What's going to fall?
The kingdom.
The kingdom, the great kingdom of the Persians, the great empires. But in fact, the oracle is talking about his own kingdom, right? He attacks, gets soundly defeated. Cyrus takes over Lydia, all right? Cyrus is going to die. His son Cambyses will actually come and conquer most of Egypt down here, right? So under Cambyses, the Persians will control an empire, again, that's going to stretch from Afghanistan to Asia Minor, right, down to Egypt. Here's another picture of the Persian Empire. All right, now, a couple things about the Persian Empire that are important to know. Okay, I'm not going to be able to do it all justice here in this short period of time, but a couple of highlights. The Persian kings, right, the rulers of this Persian Empire, Cyrus, Cambyses, etc., held absolute power, right? So in theory, no real checks and balances. The king's word was law. The Greeks kind of uncharitably described this as a form of slavery. That all subjects of the Persian king were his slaves, that he could treat however he wished. Again, that's not quite true, but also not quite false as well too, right? Meaning it's like the Persian king would probably get in trouble if he tried to act however he wanted, but theoretically, he possessed complete power over his land and all of his subjects, right? Not true slavery, because that's also going to exist in both Persia and Greece, but at least this is how the Greeks describe it. Okay. So, the way the Persian Empire worked, right, is that they drew upon many of the precedents that were set by the Neo-Assyrians. They adopt the language, right, that was used by the Neo-Assyrians as their kind of imperial common language, right? So they didn't get rid of Persian, but they used Aramaic, this was the language that the Neo-Assyrians used, as the kind of official business language of the Persian Empire in order to kind of maintain these connections. They kind of drew upon the Neo-Assyrian provincial structure, establishing their own provinces that you can see here. A way of kind of controlling these larger territories. They drew upon the idea of the Neo-Assyrians building roads. They built big road networks all throughout their empire, including the Royal Road, kind of the main superhighway that's going to go from Sardis all the way down here to the Persian capital of Susa, right?
Were the Chaldeans and the Neo-Babylonians the same people?
Sort of. So technically, there's some variations. For our purposes, they're the same, and the Greeks pretty much treated them as the same. So it depends what you want for your answer. Were they exactly the same? Not 100%, but yeah. Okay. Hi.
I left a piece of paper here. I'm not
Oh.
sure if it's here.
Okay. I didn't see anything. Do you know where you left it? Did you leave it up here? or-
Yeah, like I left it on this table. Sorry
No,
again.
no problem. No, I didn't see anything up here. So
Okay, I'll leave it.
I'll keep a look out for it. So if I see anything, what's your name?
Kayla.
Kayla. Okay. Well, if I see anything, I'll let you know. Okay.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
I don't know. If I see anything, I'll leave it here for you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye. Bye.
All right. So, new road network, provinces, investing in the Persian army, right? So again, borrowing upon these early kind of imperial model to have a successful Persian empire. The Persian king styled himself the King of Kings. This was his official title, the Shah-an-Shah. That there were many kings in the world, but there was only one king of all the kings, right? And in fact, this reflects one aspect of the imperial rule, right? Is that there were some kind of kingdoms that were under Persian power, where the kings kind of retained their authority, but recognized kind of the overall authority of the Persian King of Kings. All right. There were taxes, but in fact, the taxes were pretty low, and in fact, rather reasonable. And the taxes brought notable improvements with them, like new roads and protection from the army. And with that comes increased trade. The Persian kings also adopted a policy of autonomy and tolerance. Generally speaking, they were like, we don't care what you do, we don't care what language you speak, we don't care what gods you worship, you kind of do your own thing. You recognize the imperial power, you pay your reasonable taxes, it'll all be good. This is going to prove to be a very popular style of rule, right? One of the most famous examples we have is that the Jewish people, the Israelites, who had been forced into exile under the Neo-Assyrians and the Babylonians, are allowed to return to their ancestral homeland. And Cyrus is going to be celebrated as a hero to the Jewish people because of his policies here. Okay, so where I'm going with this,
That's a one.
what's that?
That's a good one.
That's
A new one.
a new one, right? Okay. I forgot I had this up there. Oh, geez. Okay, I already talked about all this stuff, right? What we end up with, right, with all of this stuff is 500 BCE. Persia is the largest, it's the most powerful, the richest, and the most cosmopolitan, multicultural empire state in the world. And a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people are really happy to be part of the Persian Empire, right? The Persian Empire has brought a time of prosperity to the region, okay? The reason why this is important to mention is from here we're going to go on and we pretty much get the Greek point of view. And the Greek point of view is very unfavorable, or at least it's the dominant Greek view that we have. More on that in a second, right? So it's kind of important to recognize that kind of the Greek story is not the entire story, right? But nonetheless, it's useful context for why things kind of turn out the way they do. Okay, any questions here? Questions? So Persian Empire, big, rich, reasonably tolerant, generally seems like a good place to live by ancient standards. people are prosperous. All right. So, as I said, a lot of people are happy to be part of the Persian Empire. Not everyone. The west coast of Asia Minor, there where you see all the red dots, is a region known as Ionia. Ionia was made up of Greek city-states that were established during the Greek colonization period. They had been conquered and absorbed earlier by Lydia, by Croesus. But when Lydia was conquered by the Persians, they now came under Persian rule. Some of the Ionian city-states weren't happy being part of the Persian Empire. Some were, some weren't. Led by Aristagoras, the tyrant of Miletus, several of the Ionian city-states are going to rise up and seek independence from the Persian kings. Aristagoras reaches out to two of the most powerful of the Greek city-states at the time, asking for assistance in their fight against the Persians. Sparta, who responds, nope, and Athens, who says yes. And so Athens is going to send a fair amount of support, so ships and money to help the Ionians in their revolt. The revolt, however, is going to be unsuccessful, right? So the Persians are going to win out. Miletus is going to be basically leveled. It's going to be devastated as punishment. To further extend Persian rule, right, after putting down the Ionian revolt, the Persian general Mardonius is going to move westwards, up where that red arrow is, conquering the regions of Thrace and what will become important later on in the class, Macedonia. Okay, questions here? So, 490, a couple years later, the Persian king of kings Darius decides that it is time to punish the Athenians for their work, for their support of the Ionian revolt against his power. Now, you remember our friend Hippias, the tyrant who had been kicked out of Athens by Sparta. He had eventually made his way to the court of the Persian king. So Darius says, well, the best way to punish Athens is to sail back, conquer Athens, put Hippias in charge as a tyrant and subject leader, subject to kind of Persian authority. So the Persian fleet sails with Hippias, and they land here in northern Attica at the plain of Marathon. A huge Persian army disembarks. The Greeks are very, very late to respond. A small force of Athenians and their neighbors from Plataea marshal up and march out to the plain of Marathon to fight off the Persian invasion. They're led by an Athenian archon and general by the name of Miltiades. Realistically, no one gives the Greeks a chance at winning. The goal is, well, hopefully they're going to buy enough time, kind of slow down the Persian army, so that the people from the city of Athens can evacuate and escape. So the Athenians are in full evacuation mode, but against all odds, the Athenians and the Plataeans win. That their military technology and a little bit of luck and generalship is going to win out. What's the military technology that the Greeks are employing at this point? What?
Would be chariots.
No chariots yet. Persians are still using lots of chariots. Greeks have moved on. Phalanx. The hoplites all lined up in a shield wall, right? And so the force of the phalanx, like I said, plus some luck and good generalship, against all odds, the Athenians win out. And the people of Athens are in the process of evacuating. So Miltiades sends a runner by the name of Pheidippides, who is going to run quickly as he can, without even taking off his armor, to the city of Athens in order to tell them of the victory and that they don't need to evacuate. Anyone want to guess how far it is from the plain of Marathon to the city of Athens?
I'm gonna say over 100 miles.
Nope. Good guess, but nope.
Is it 25?
You're on the right track.
30?
No, you're on the right track too, but it's 26 miles.
Oh.
Which is the distance of the modern marathon, right? So the modern marathon is celebrating the run that Pheidippides makes from the plain here to Athens, the city center, to announce, hey, you don't need to evacuate. We won.
So you're saying we should run our marathons with armors?
Well, Pheidippides supposedly makes it to the city, announces the victory to the people, and then immediately drops dead. So, I don't know what lesson you want to take away from that. Don't run marathons in armor. Don't run marathons, I'm not sure, right? But there you go. However, stories abound that when the Athenian army was on the plain of Marathon, a shield was flashing messages to the Persian high command, telling them that the city of Athens was unguarded. Rumor has it, was this the Alcmenids looking to curry Persian support and gain power? No one knows. So, aftermath of the invasion. Darius dies, he is succeeded by his son Xerxes. Right? Xerxes is not content to let matters stand. He starts preparing for a new invasion. At this time, in Laurium, which is a region of Attica, the Athenians discover new silver mines. Very, very rich silver mines. So all of a sudden, new money for Athens. There's a big debate in Athens about how this windfall should be spent. Should we divide it up and every Athenian citizen gets its share? Should we build some new buildings in Athens? One Athenian statesman by the name of Themistocles makes another argument. He says we need to build a new navy. We need to build new ships. He says the Persians aren't done. They're coming back again. We got kind of lucky with Marathon, but we're going to need to protect ourselves. The best way to do it is with a navy, to keep the Persians from getting too close. So, Themistocles wins out. Money from the Silver Nine is used to build new ships, and the Athenians build new, essentially kind of battleships that are called triremes. So called because there are 3 levels of rowers, of oars, right? Which is much bigger than any of the previous ship designs, right? So this is a modern recreation of a trireme, 170 rowers there on the ship, right? So the ship can go much faster and is much more powerful than ever before, right? Earlier ships had about 50 rowers. So you got the money, you build new ships, but you need people to staff them. Who's going to staff the ships? And this is very, very important. So this is very, very important. You've got new ships, you need a lot more rowers. They're going to come from the Thetes. All right, so who remembers the Thetes? Who were the Thetes? Anthony?
Were they one of the lower classes?
They were the lowest wealth class in Athens. And they were the ones, what kind of defined their class? Like what were they not able to afford?
They were not able to afford like their gear, their taxes,
Their gear, what kind of gear?
like to fight in the army.
To fight in the army. So remember, to fight in the army as a hoplite, you had to provide your own arms and weapons. The Thetes were basically defined as people that didn't have enough money to kind of, to buy their own arms and weapons, right? So this is going to represent a new opportunity for the Thetes to be involved militarily. And because you need more rowers and you've got more ships, a lot more Thetes are going to serve. So this is going to be very, very important. Okay. Everyone good here? All right. Persian invasion part 2, right? So 480, 10 years later, under the leadership of Xerxes, right? The Persians strike out again. First, they send envoys, ambassadors to each individual Greek city-state, saying the Persians are coming, right? But we're coming for you now. Now is the time for you to submit, right? And the way that submission worked is that you were to give the Persian king earth and water from your city-state as a sign that you recognized his authority. And in fact, many Greek poleases ended up complying with this, right? They're like, yep, the Persians are coming, the Persians are stronger, you know, there's not much to be done, we're going to submit to his authority. Plus, they say it's not so bad being part of the Persian Empire. All right, so many do. Other Greeks have a name for this, and it becomes a very, very bad word. Medizing. Do you remember the Medes were the other Iranian people, right? Who the Persians actually conquer, but the Greeks use kind of Mede and Persian interchangeably. So that those who were submitting to the Persian king were Medizing. Now what this overlooks, right, is that there were lots of Greek people, even before this point, who were part of the Persian Empire, right? Greeks in Ionia, and even some around the Black Sea region and Thrace. Many of them are coming with the Persian army. Some of them against their will, but some of them, I guess, willingly are serving as well too, right? So it's not simply Greeks versus Persians, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Okay, was there a question? Question? No question? All right. So Persians are coming. Greeks say, okay, we got to work together on this. They form a self-defense league called the Hellenic League, right? It just means the Greek League, right? And everyone recognizes, well, who are the best soldiers, who are the best fighters? Sparta. Sparta's going to be in charge. Immediately after forming the Hellenic League, there's a big debate. Where are we going to kind of make our stand against the Persians? Sparta and many others say, well, the way to do it is to hold the Peloponnese. So the Peloponnesus, this area here, is connected to the mainland by a very small isthmus, right? So they say, look, if we pull all of our troops down here to the Peloponnese, we can garrison the isthmus. That's the best way to hold off the Persians. And we'll evacuate all the other cities. Now, if you were from a Peloponnesian city, this sounded like a great idea. If you were from a non-Peloponnesian city, you weren't too happy. So there's a big debate. Perhaps, again, surprisingly, the alternate view holds out that the Greeks are going to try to hold the mainland. They decide the best place to make their stand is at a mountain pass at Thermopylae, right? So Thermopylae, they're going to try to hold off the Persian armies, right? But just to be sure, why don't we send an evacuation order anyway, right? One of the main groups to evacuate are going to be the Athenians, right? They're going to evacuate to the island of Salamis, which is just offshore. That becomes important a little bit later. All right, Mohammed.
Yeah. Did the northern regions also evacuate, or was it just Athens?
A little of both. If you look here at the map, right, a lot of the Persian areas are under Persian control. Thessaly allies with Persia, right? You've got this region here that pretty much tries to stay neutral and tries to stay out of it. You've got Thebes, right, which is like, oh no, we're Persian, right? So this area up here, you'll get a little bit of everything. So you don't have as many big city-states up here. And in fact, we think that maybe some people might have evacuated, but we're not quite sure.
Well, as those states became allies to the Persian Empire.
So, little one?
As those states became allies to the
Persia,
Empire,
yeah.
So do they like the army has to fight for the Persian
Yeah.
king, or do? Okay,
So the armies are fighting on the Persian side.
against the Spartan and Athenians, right?
Well, Spartan in Athens is on the Greek side,
Yeah.
so to speak, right? Or the anti-Persian side. But there are Greeks that are on the Persian side, right? And again, some of them are willing allies, like they are happy to be allied with the Persians, and there's some that are kind of unwilling allies where they're under Persian control, they gotta send troops, but they're not very happy about it. And everything in between, right? Yeah. All right. Everyone good here? So-
Last question.
All right, go ahead.
How long do support process takes? Like how much time does this process of like allies and armies and governments how long does the process takes for like a Persian empire to take control of other state armies and
Not that, well, that's the thing, they don't take direct control.
yeah.
So most of it, especially the further away you get from the Persian capital, is you're autonomous, you do your own thing, you just recognize that the Persian king's in charge. So basically it might require like shipping some taxes to Persia. So like a good example of this that we're going to talk about later is going to be Macedon. Right, Macedon's going to have its own king, it's pretty much business as usual, send some taxes to Persia, and then when the Persian army comes, they set a muster point, right? And they're like, okay, so have your army meet us here. Then the army will kind of meet up and join the Persian forces when the Persian army gets near. So relatively quickly, I guess, because it doesn't require big changes. Okay. So, who knows the story of Thermopylae and the Spartans? Johan, what's the story of Thermopylae?
So it's been a while, but if I'm remembering correctly, they were at the mountain pass. It was like 300 Spartans and a bunch of Athenians. They were holding that pass with the Persians. So you had a bunch of them. They were gonna lose, I think. So they had some of the other soldiers evacuate for another time, and then you had the 300 Spartans and other Athenians. It was like 3,000 something. I forgot the exact number.
Well, according to the sources, it was 1,000. It wasn't Athenians.
But just Greeks.
Greeks. It's the people that always get left out of the story. The Thesbians, from the city-state of Thesbia, which no one ever thinks of, but they always get left out of the story. I always feel bad for the Thesbians.
Yeah, because it's always just the 300.
It's always the Spartans.
Yeah.
Right?
But I know that there were other Greeks there.
Right.
But yeah, so they stay behind to hold off the Persians, giving the other city-states time. I forgot for what exactly, but eventually they get overwhelmed and the Persians pass. But they buy enough time for the Greeks to do whatever it was that they were going to do.
Absolutely, right? So the Spartans, led by the famous King Leonidas. So remember, there were two Spartan kings, right? One of them would be out in the field with the army, the other one would be at home in Sparta, right? So Leonidas, the famous general, is out leading the forces, right? And there's a coalition of the Greeks there at Thermopylae. They're holding off the Persians for a while. Doesn't seem like the Persians can break them. But who remembers from the reading? What's the problem? What happens?
Was there a traitor involved?
There was a traitor involved, or at least from the Greek perspective, there was a traitor, right? So a Persian sympathizer who shows the Persians kind of a back route where they can get around the kind of blockade that the Spartans and the other Greeks have set. And so when Leonidas learns that the Persians are coming around the rear, he recognizes that, okay, all is lost. He sends the other Greeks away, saying, go down, fortify the southern port of Greece, right? Evacuate and fortify the Peloponnesus. We 300 Spartans will hold off the Persians. The other people that stay, right? The Thespians, 700 Thespians refuse to leave. They stay and fight with the Spartans. And then there's another group of Greeks that stay with them too, kind of by force. These are the Thebans, the most notorious of the Medizers, right? One of very powerful Greek city-state, very pro-Persia. Leonidas keeps them with them because he doesn't want them at his back. And again, right, one of the first things they do when the Persians show up is like, we surrender, we're on your side, which Herodotus throws a lot of shade at them, basically talking about, Yeah, big shock to everyone. Persians show up, and the first thing the Thebans do is surrender and go over to their side. These were like the biggest Medizers ever, right? So they're there. In the end, right, they get defeated. Now, the story here can tell us something really, really interesting about the Spartans and the Spartan image that gets cultivated. So in our reading for today, pages 12 through 13, right, or sections 229 to 232, we hear about a couple of Spartans who actually survive, or at least initially, the assault at Thermopylae. All right, so who knows the story of these Spartans here? Who remembers? In 229, 230. No one knows. All right, look at page 12. Primary source document, number whatever this is, 9, from Herodotus. So Herodotus just talks about the story of Thermopylae, all the Spartans and the Thesbians dying, the Thebans surrendering, but many of them dying in the process of surrendering. 229, it is said that 2 of these 300, Eurytus and Aristodemus, could have agreed with each other either to come home safely together to Sparta, since Leonidas had dismissed them from the camp and they were lying in Alpeni, very sick of ophthalmia, basically an eye disease, or to die with the others if they were unwilling to return home. They could have done either of these things, but they could not agree and had different intentions. When Eurytus learned of the Persian circuit, that the Persians were coming around the back, he demanded his armor and put it on, bidding his helot to lead him to the fighting. So the guy couldn't see. He has his helot direct him to the battle. The helot led him there and fled, but Eurytus rushed into the fray and was killed. Why was he killed? He couldn't see, right? So he's basically running into bind. So the general had dismissed him. It's like, you guys can't see. You guys go and recover there. He's like, no, right? Persians are coming. I am going to go fight them. He rushes in blind and he dies. The other one, however, lost his strength and stayed behind. Now, if Aristodemus alone had been sick and returned to Sparta, so meaning if he was the only guy who was sick and went home, or if both of them had made the trip together, I think the Spartans would not have been angry with them. When, however, one of them died, and the other had the same excuse but was unwilling to die, the Spartans had no choice but to display great anger towards Aristodemus. Right? And so he's going to be shunned by the Spartans, as he talks about in other paragraphs. So what is this supposed to communicate about the Spartans? What is this story supposed to tell us? Nicola.
What I gather it tells us is that the Spartans believe in, like, I don't know, dying to the death, like going to the death, fighting to the death and not surrendering, not coming home, especially when there's others who die.
Mm-hmm. I mean, certainly, like Leonidas and the 300 show all of that, right? Ryan?
No. No, honestly, I'll say I completely different response. Honestly, I have a completely different response on this, because I would say the Spartans value strength and usefulness above everything else. And that initial weakness will be seen as something that will slow down the collective effort.
Okay.
Especially when you consider how one being blind,
Mm-hmm. Or both of them being blind.
both of them being blind, can be, let's say, how both of them being blind and can make a mess of things. for everyone else.
Okay. So strength, right? Showing no weakness. Sure. 232. We get one of the other 300 actually survived too. It is said that another of the 300 survived because he was sent as a messenger to Thessaly.
He returned to Sparta. He was dishonored and hanged himself.
So once again, why did he miss the battle at Thermopylae?
He was sent to us.
He was sent
You know, miss-
by his general on a mission. And he missed the battle. So when he returns to Sparta, what happens?
He gets hung.
Well, first he gets dishonored, and he was removed from his position.
Sort of. I mean, he was dishonored, but then, so you're right, but then he didn't get hanged. He
Hanged himself.
He committed suicide, right? So what can these examples tell us about the Spartans, right? Or at least how they were supposed to be viewed? So yes, strength and dying. But what does Herodotus say? He said, well, these guys were blind. Their general dismissed them. If they both went home, Herodotus says, I don't think there would have been a problem. If Aristodemus was the only one, if there was only one of them, and he went home, missing the battle, would have been fine. What was the problem with that first case study? Like, what led to Aristodemus getting dishonored?
Eurydice died.
Right, like someone else was in the same position as him and chose to die, and he didn't. But if there was no Eurydice there, or if Eurydice decided to go home, Herodotus said, I think everything would have been okay. Right? Or here we get the guy's off on Pantheius is off as a messenger, and then returns home, gets dishonored. Right? For missing the battle. So part of this is dying, right, for Sparta, but part of it is something else, right? What's the other thing that's here underneath the surface that these stories say? Kieran?
Like honor, like warrior culture honor.
Yeah, right. So like honor, and where does honor come from?
I would say like Athena, right? Like the gods or the goddesses that they believed or worshipped.
Sort of. But here I'm talking more anthropological, right? In your community, where does honor come from? Who is honored? Johan? In a community.
What, like us?
Yeah, just in any community. Who's honored? If I said someone was honored, what does that mean?
Is that you're recognizing someone for doing something great.
Who's recognizing?
You.
Who's the you?
Or everyone.
Members of the community are recognizing someone for having done something good, right? And are giving them praise, status, recognition. What's the problem with these examples here in Sparta, right? Part of it's not dying, but part of it is the context in which you don't die and the judgment,
Not bad.
right? But it's also the judgment that the community is putting on you, right? Okay, so again, part of this Spartan image, this is going to kind of contribute to things. We're out of time now, so I'll pick up more next week. If anyone else has any last questions.